Ever felt guilty for setting boundaries with a narcissist? Here's why. You finally did it. After weeks, months, or perhaps even years of continually overextending yourself and consistently placing your own needs last. You finally did it. You stood your ground and established a boundary with a narcissist in your life.
God!
You said no to an unreasonable demand.
No, God,
broke
please,
free from the
no,
endless cycle of arguments, and made the courageous decision to walk away from the drama entirely, reclaiming your peace and sense of self. In your mind, you are fully aware that this was the correct decision. You understand deep down that it was an act of survival and self-preservation. However, rather than feeling empowered or uplifted by this choice, you are overwhelmed by a heavy, suffocating weight. You experience a complex mix of emotions, notably a deep sense of guilt that clings to you. You're sitting in the quiet, wondering, why does something that is supposed to protect me feel so inherently wrong? You feel like the villain in your story, even though you're just trying to survive the chaos and burden of having to interact with a narcissist. If that's where you're right now, I want you to stop and take a deep breath. You aren't doing anything wrong. What you're experiencing is a psychological phenomenon that happens when we break a toxic pattern. Today, we're going to dive into the psychology of why this happens, and more importantly, how you can stop that guilt from tearing down the walls you worked so hard to build. We have to start by defining what a boundary is. Setting boundaries is a basic act of self-preservation and an essential part of our everyday lives. It's how we communicate our limits to others. It's the way we say, this is what I need to feel safe and respected, and I'm not willing to compromise on it. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, the standard rules of human interaction don't apply. To understand the guilt, you have to understand the reality of the person on the other side. Narcissists are characterized by a sense of entitlement, deep-seated self-centeredness, and a profound lack of empathy. Because they view the world, and specifically you, as an extension of themselves rather than an independent person. They don't see your boundary as a healthy limit. They see it as a personal attack or betrayal of the role they've assigned to you. When you set that boundary, a narcissist won't say, I understand, or I'm sorry I overstepped. Instead, they react with anger, manipulation, or guilt tripping. This reaction is designed to make you feel like you've committed a crime. It creates a disorienting situation where the boundary meant to protect your mental health actually makes you doubt your own reality. You started to wonder if you're being too sensitive or unreasonable, which is exactly what the narcissist wants you to think. So, why does the guilt feel so heavy? Why does it feel like a weight in your chest? It's because of the overextended time of conditioning. When you've been around a narcissist for a long time, you've been subtly trained always to please them over your own stability. You've been conditioned to please them at all costs, just to avoid the next explosion or the next cold shoulder. But when you try to break free and put limits on that behavior, it feels deeply uncomfortable. But I want you to listen closely to this. That discomfort you made is a mistake. It's because you're changing. You are setting a brand new standard for how you want to be treated, and your brain is still trying to follow the old, toxic map. Here's the thing you need to remember closely. Guilt doesn't always mean you've done something wrong. In this context, guilt is often just your mind and body adjusting to a new way of thinking and acting. You are breaking an old habit of self-neglect. Think of this guilt as a withdrawal symptom. When you stop feeding a narcissist's needs at your own expense, your system goes into shock. But remember, setting a boundary is a healthy act of self-preservation, and that's never something to feel guilty and have to apologize for. So, what do you do when that guilt hits you like a wave? You must learn how to process it without letting it control your actions. You have to become the observer of your guilt rather than the victim of it. First, acknowledge the guilt without obeying it or allowing it to dictate your actions. When the feeling rises within you, that familiar tightness in your chest, or that nagging voice in your head, pause and say to yourself with compassion and clarity, I feel guilty right now, but that's just a signal that I'm breaking an old habit. It doesn't mean I've done something bad. Recognize that guilt is simply an emotional response, often conditioned by years of people-pleasing or putting others' needs before your own. This discomfort you're experiencing is not evidence of wrongdoing. Rather, it's a natural reaction to change, a sign that you're stepping outside your comfort zone and challenging deeply ingrained patterns of behavior. By naming the emotion and understanding its true source, you create distance between the feeling and your response to it. You don't have to let guilt control you or convince you to abandon your boundaries. Instead, observe it, acknowledge its presence, and then consciously choose to move forward anyway, knowing that this temporary discomfort is part of your growth and healing process. Next, you must validate your boundary by consciously affirming its importance. Remind yourself that your needs, your emotional, mental, and physical well-being matter just as much as anyone else's. Setting limits is not an act of selfishness or indifference. It is a fundamental necessity for maintaining your health and sustaining meaningful relationships over time. When you establish boundaries, you are not rejecting others. You are honoring your own capacity to give and receive. Think of yourself as a cup. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Without clear boundaries, you risk burnout, resentment, and emotional depletion. By setting limits, you create space for your energy to replenish, allowing you to show up more fully, authentically, and compassionately in your life and relationships. This act of self-care is not a luxury. It is a vital practice that enables you to live with integrity, clarity, and resilience. Trust that by honoring your limits, you are not only protecting yourself, but also setting a powerful example of self-respect for others to witness and perhaps emulate. Then, reframe the act. Instead of seeing it as keeping someone out or shutting people away, which can carry negative connotation, consciously shift your perspective to see it as keeping yourself safe and honoring your own well-being. This mental reframing transforms boundary setting from an act of exclusion into one of self-preservation and care. Remind yourself daily, perhaps through affirmations or quiet reflection, that protecting your energy is not selfish or unkind. It is your primary responsibility. Finally, affirm yourself. Tell yourself that it's okay to feel uncomfortable during this transition. Growth is rarely comfortable. And most importantly, and I cannot stress this enough, don't take on their discomfort. A narcissist will try to make you feel responsible for their anger or their sadness because you said no. But their discomfort is a result of their own inability to respect you. It does not belong to you. Learning how to protect your peace is a skill, and like any skill, it takes practice. It is something you should never feel guilty about. The guilt you feel right now doesn't mean your boundary was wrong. It just means you are successfully breaking free from old patterns that no longer serve you. Every time you feel that guilt and choose to stay firm anyway, you are healing. Every time you refuse to back down just to make the narcissist feel better, you are reclaiming a piece of yourself that was lost. Trust yourself. Stand firm in your boundaries. You are teaching the world how to treat you, and that is the most important work you will ever do. And always remember the most important truth of all. Your peace matters.